I'm iPad Tom. We're at the National Museum of American Indians here in Washington, D.C. with Chef Freddie Bitsoie, the head executive chef at the Misitam Cafe with Gloria Goodtaste.
I know that redefining indigenous cuisine has always been an important goal for you. Now, how has becoming the executive chef here helped you with this quest?
Well, it helped me a lot because there are over 500 tribes, federally recognized tribes, in the United States alone, let alone more in Canada, which we refer to as Aboriginals or First Nations. And then there are also a lot of indigenous cultures in Mexico, a lot of indigenous cultures in South America. Now, what a lot of people don't understand at times is the National Museum of the American Indian, where Misitam is located. It's a hemispherical museum, so it displays exhibitions and work and stories from the entire hemisphere. So the cafe here at Misitam pretty much reflects the same area. So we're talking about half the world's cuisine being represented in one small cafe. It makes it easier to try to redefine native cuisine, but at the same time it makes it more difficult because, after all, it is a restaurant, so being unique, and it is one of the leaders of native cuisine in the world.
Wonderful.
So it's difficult to balance everything that's involved, because we have guests who prefer traditional foods, we have guests who prefer more exotic foods, we have guests who are nitpicking about how it represents a certain tribe, and so the best way that I could pull everybody back when I started this job is to start from the beginning. So the first menu that I rolled out was kind of like get to know Chef Freddie, his flavors, his likings, his dislikings, and also for the cooks. Because when a new chef comes, there's a different cooking technique, there's a different style, there's a different flavor profile. So one thing that I found really unique about introducing recipes to my staff is they would look at the recipe and their first response was, "That's it?"
That's good.
Which is really good.
It is.
Only because it let me know that there was nothing wrong with the chefs before. It's just that I believe that foods are mostly, especially native foods, are very simplistic, but not in a negative way. In a simplistic way that it extracts as much flavor as possible. So redefining native cuisine, since I got this job, it really helps it really helps me to kind of reevaluate everything that I've been working on before. So the journey, I guess, of redefining is still going on, because after all, this is my third menu. The journey in that respect is very difficult. The way that I redefine native cuisine is just real food, food that tells stories, and at the same time, food that represents the result of how a culture has redefined itself in the United States and in the hemisphere. Because all indigenous cultures have been colonized in this part of the world. So reclaiming, repatronizing, all of the re's that are involved with trying to preserve a culture.
Well, how did you ever get started in this career? I mean, what forced you into this path?
I actually stumbled upon it. I majored in anthropology, and I minored in art history. And that's really important in my career because majoring in anthropology, I got a new sense of history. We tend to be taught humanities history, whereas, everything's written, when it comes to humanities history, everything's written by the victor, the wealthy, and the ones that can write. Whereas anthropology is a history that is being reevaluated.
Now, how did your family background affect you, though?
It's
the same way?
My family background?
Yeah, you're getting into the same thing.
Oh,
Yes.
well, what had happened was when I was in my anthropology class,
Uh-huh.
the my archaeologist instructor, he called me to talk to him, and I was kind of afraid, like, why? And he showed me 3 papers that I wrote, and he goes, I want to know something from you.
Mm-hmm.
He goes, why did you write about food in all of your papers? And I said, I didn't do it on purpose. And he goes, because I was majoring in ethnography. And he goes, you ethnographers tend to BS when you're in an archaeology class. Because archaeology and ethnography, it's really science and art,
Certainly.
culture and science. So in archaeology, it's kind of like, where's the proof? Where's the proof? But in ethnography, it's, well, that's what people believed in. So he was very surprised that I was pretty adamant on writing about food. And that's where the idea clicked in. And I didn't realize that I was so interested in food, in ancient Puebloan food culture. So he kind of threw that out at me and said, why don't you, explore this a little? So when I went to, I jumped ship from college. My last semester in college, I jumped ship and I went to culinary school. And I thought, I'll be back, UNM, and so
Don't we all
in
think
Albuquerque,
that?
yeah, it was embedded in me that I would get back to UNM in Albuquerque. So I got to culinary school in Scottsdale, and it was a different world. And without sounding elitist or anything in that respect, it was a trade school, and I thought I would learn the history of the culinary world. I thought I would learn a lot more. Number one, I thought I would learn how to cook, if that makes any sense.
It does.
And number two, or I guess let me rephrase that. I thought culinary school would allow me to enhance my culinary skills, which in a way it does. But it just teaches people how to cook for the masses. It doesn't tell you this spice goes great with this protein or this herb goes great with this vegetable. It doesn't.
Is that where your family background came in to help you?
Yeah.
To do that transfer?
So
Wonderful.
I was really interested in foods from the Colorado Plateau area. And I kept asking about sage, juniper, sumac, things in that respect. And they knew what sage and juniper was, but when it came to sumac, they were thinking, what is that? And so it kind of clicked in my brain, like, people don't know about sumac berries on the Navajo reservation, but it wasn't an important thing yet in my career. And I started moving forward. I was in Phoenix after culinary school, and I heard the term Native American cuisine, and I kind of didn't know what that was.
I think
was
a
lost.
lot of people don't understand really what it is, though.
It was something in my train of thought, thinking, this doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, this term doesn't make sense. What is native cuisine? And I kind of started on my own studies. So I did a lot of work at Heard Museum on my own time. I was looking at pots. I was looking at utilitarian artifacts, things in that nature, and I still was lost. So I would search native cuisine on online, and nothing was really popping up. Just simple recipes,
Right.
Simple recipes about what native cuisine is, and we all saw the fry bread recipes, things very common like the Indian taco, and so I was thinking, maybe I should figure this out on my own.
That was a smart move.
That was a very smart move. It was a struggle, but at the same time, it's the one thing that I knew that I was fulfilled at. I mean, because I had side jobs to help me, finance, my studies and everything. Right. It was all studying on my own. I went to reservations my own. I met people. We talked about things, and it was really nothing formal, but it was just a Saturday here, Saturday there.
But it builds your experience.
It does,
doesn't it? Tremendous.
And the amount of networking,
Right.
that built. So I got a job in Scottsdale with the culinary school, that they wanted to explore Native American cuisine, and they're no longer working with Native cuisine, but it enabled me to have a official title.
Mm-hmm.
So I got to do a little more. So I got to travel more nationally. And when I was giving my lectures at the very beginning, I was thinking, I don't even know what I'm talking about. But I'm talking about something. And if you look at if you go to YouTube and you see all my old lectures, I think back and I think, you sound like you know what you're talking about, but still, I didn't know what I was talking about because it was a new argument. It was a new.
It has a new direction.
It was something new, precisely. Mm-hmm. And the point was, one day after work, I got home and I saw Lydia Bastianich's television show.
Which is good.
And what I enjoyed about her show was there would be a little map on the left side of Italy. Mm-hmm. And then she'd talk about a certain recipe, and then she'd say, "Oh, this one is from Piemonte," and then like the Piedmont the Piemonte area of the map would kind of, come out to display mm-hmm. what part of Italy it is. And then the next show she talked about Sardinia, and I kind of thought, if I could explain Native cuisine in this capacity, I think it would make a little more sense.
Did you use that philosophy
that was
for
my
this
model.
cafe, though, too?
No, the restaurant that the company that I work for,
uh-huh.
because the restaurant is managed by a different company. It's contracted.
Mm-hmm. Right.
They were the ones who worked with the museum. The museum has a lot of input to the cafe.
Uh-huh.
So they decided, let's do a regional type of
it sounds almost like
cafe.
You decided that, though.
I wish I could take the credit.
Do.
But it would be hard to convince people that I planned the cafe when it's been open for 12 years and I've only been here for 6 months.
Oh, well.
So looking at it regionally, I think was the best thing to do. Mm-hmm. And also describing foods from their tribal affiliation. Because foods are, the one thing that people tend to be really disappointed in hearing is cooking is a universal cultural practice.
Right.
Nothing
mm-hmm.
is new.
Mm-hmm.
There's absolutely nothing new about cooking. Mm-hmm. There's differences, but recipes are just tweaked. You have chefs who have a way of reinterpreting recipes. Mm-hmm. You have chefs doing a recipe, like breaking it down. What's the term I'm looking for?
Creating something else up with them.
Yeah, it's on the tip of my tongue, but breaking down the recipe mm-hmm. and then presenting it in a new way. Mm-hmm. And so that's what we do. But cooking in any capacity, it's not a new thing. So describing Native cuisine was just making myself know that. It made it a lot easier to explain it. For example, when the Iberians came to modern-day Central America, they brought the technique of sautéing, the technique of cooking with fat, and using dairy. Because in the Western Hemisphere, the majority of people didn't consume any dairy products. Mm-hmm. That's why there's a high lactose intolerability with most indigenous people. And also cooking with oil. It just wasn't something that we did. We'd use animal fat as an ingredient, but as far as how people deep fry things in lard or things at that level, it was really nothing it wasn't a cooking technique. Mm-hmm. And as minimal as that may seem, just changing the food cooking culture changes, makes a big difference to a whole society, because you get new pots and you get new utilities like new pots, new types of cooking ware, and those are things that all result of native cooking. So when the Europeans came, we were introduced to new cooking oil, we had to make things that would hold oil.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of what we had to do. So I think that I kind of got lost here.
Now, is that the difference then between traditional cooking and like the new idea of contemporary cooking? What's the big difference between those two?
Traditional cooking is a term that I tend to not try to use.
Okay, classic.
Yeah, classic.
Okay, well,
Classic,
that
because the reason being is traditional is one of those terms that people make their own, and it's very subjective.
one. Oh, okay.
Very, very subjective.
All right.
If you go to any reservation, people will say that's not traditional,
Oh, all right.
and it kind of makes me think. It makes me think, what is traditional? When we think about like Christmas, and people say it's not a traditional Christmas. Well, my Christmas that I know as tradition is completely different than everybody else's, and that's how it comes to native food. And people will say that's not traditional enough. That's not how my grandma does it. Well, the best way for me to explain this is ethnic food is fundamentally grandma's food. It's not anything that's sold in a restaurant. It's not anything that is commercialized. It's grandma's food. There's an Italian group of people out there whose grandmother makes the best lasagna. And that argument started hundreds of years ago, and they're still arguing about it today. There's a Native American family out there whose grandma makes the best fry bread, and that community is still arguing about which grandma they're talking about. Nobody makes anything good enough when we use the word traditional.
Okay.
Nobody makes anything right enough when we use the word traditional. It's not traditional. So it's a term that I always tend to not use. I'll say classically made, or
Well, how has classics just changed then?
the classics changed because of the classics changed based on the cooking technique.
Oh, okay, based on that technique.
And I'll use Pasoli as an example.
Okay, good.
Pasoli is probably one of the oldest continually made dishes in the history of mankind.
I'm going to say it's delicious too.
It's really good. It's one of my favorite dishes.
I know, it's the one I made this week.
I heard you made it off the
I know.
website.
Yes.
And traditionally, there's the word.
Gotcha.
Native people generally made soups and stews like teas, like how you would steep a tea.
Mm-hmm.
You just put everything in water and turn the fire on and just wait till it's done.
Mm-hmm.
That's not a bad technique. It's not a wrong technique. That's the indigenous way to cook.
Right.
So when Europeans came, there was a system of building flavors. I'm not saying that Native people didn't build flavors at any capacity. What I'm saying is the technique of cooking soup, of preparing soup. And if people don't understand how critical culinary terms are, it's one term, as simple as it may seem, makes a big difference. So when you build a soup, there's fat involved, whether if it's bacon fat, olive oil, canola oil, any type of butter, any type of ingredient that has fat. That's what you put at the bottom of the pan first. And then you add your aromatics, which would be the onions, the garlic, the herbs, the bay leaf. That's what you would add in next. And then you would sweat them. And then after that sweating is done, that's when you add the main ingredient. If it's pork, if it's corn, if it's whatever soup is you're going to make, is what you add in next. And then after that cooks for a bit, that's when you add your liquid. You cover the product with liquid. You don't fill the stock pot with water. You just cover the product and you let it cook.
Right.
You either puree it or you let it come to a boil and reduce it. So that's like your basic technique to make a soup. With Native people, soups were just like steeping a tea. You put it in one pot, you let it cook. That's pretty much what it came down to. So when you make those when you get those two differences, it makes a huge difference on how the food works agriculturally, preserving, preparation, and also a utilitarian kind of perspective. So traditionally, these dishes that were made kind of change, and they changed flavor, because when you sweat onions, you're releasing the sugar.
Mm-hmm.
That's why onions turn brown when you sweat them for a long time, because the sugar is released and it starts cooking and it starts caramelizing, hence the term caramelized onions. So you release all of that sugar, so the flavor is different, tremendously different if you cook different, the soups in different ways. So that's one of the biggest differences. That
the herbs too,
yeah,
right?
the herbs too.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one. Again, people will say, "Well, that's not a big difference." Well, no, it is a huge difference. It is a huge difference, and it isn't to say that native indigenous people didn't appreciate their food. It was just the way that it was prepared.
Well, and they use specific herbs too
Yes.
to their location, right?
Yes, and the reason why native cuisine, I get this question asked to me all the time when it comes to technique is, well, how come native people didn't use a lot of spices? And I'm thinking, well, because we didn't need to. Middle Eastern cultures, Moroccan culture, Egyptian culture, most of the Middle East cultures, I should say North African cultures, and then Southern Spain cultures, didn't have good refrigeration. Actually, most of Europe didn't have good refrigeration. So if they were to eat lamb or if they were to eat beef, they would hold it for a while and to the point of spoilage, and then they'd cook it. Well, they wouldn't purposely hold it to spoilage, but you have about a good cow.
Right.
Most people didn't share their cow. They butchered it and then they saved the meat. But the meat would eventually spoil when it started to turn. So when they discovered spices, it really helped them. It helped them because they would overly spice their food to hide the spoiling flavor. And most of the cultures started practicing that many, many, many years ago. And with native food, though, food was killed, butchered, and then consumed, or dried. Because drying food, it's a way to preserve it without spoiling.
Sure.
So, if you look at Indian cuisine, Moroccan cuisine, it's very heavily spiced, and it's not something that is needed. It's not something that is needed with native cuisine. So that would be another way of how adding spices to native cuisine was something that wasn't done. But when you look at pozole, it's predominantly chili.
That's what I thought.
Yes. So
Yes.
chili is indigenous to this part of the world. So there was no chili on the Eastern Hemisphere prior to the Atlantic Culinary Exchange back in the very late 15th century.
Well, now, with the cafe, how do you deal with the expectations of the public for a certain cuisine that's fast food versus what you would like to promote?
Well, the cafe it's very special. It's a very special piece of the world. I enjoy it. From a chef perspective,
Okay.
it's the only destination restaurant in the country.
It is.
There are many others, but by definition, people plan to eat at the cafe, and then since they're in DC, they go out and then they do their tourist thing. But the reason why they came to DC is because of the cafe, so it draws people. So with that type of expectation, I don't know the expectation
That's a good thing, then, isn't
that
it?
they have. So, number one, the menu changes every 4 months. It doesn't stay the same, and I think that's a bad thing for guests who come and they want to taste the same thing that they had the last time they came. But it's also a good thing because there are different people coming all the time, and we have a steady clientele that come repeatedly. And they like to change in the menu because they want to see what's going on new here all the time. So cooking grandma's food, traditional food, ethnic food, all the terms that I used before, trying to balance that is what makes my job exciting. And I think people are pleased and they like it. But I have to stress that the fundamental thing that the cafe is about is it is more of an exhibition of the ingredients than it is selling traditional food.
That's a great point.
So what pine nuts can do is what the cafe is expressing. What squash can do is what the cafe is expressing. What all these ingredients, because the Western Hemisphere gave 70% of the world's food ingredients back during the culinary exchange of the late 15th century. And so these ingredients can do everything, what potatoes can do. That's what the cafe is all about to me. And it's somewhat, the purpose of the cafe. So when people come in and expect a traditional Navajo dish, eventually or sometimes they will get it. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it will be on the menu all the time. And it changes. Just like how food changes. Food changes all the time. So it gets my staff really excited. It gets me excited to know that. So
Now, what's your favorite ingredient, huh?
my favorite ingredient are cholla buds.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, now wait a minute. You're going to have to probably... Now, that's probably an ingredient I haven't used
Well,
or read that much about. Uh-oh.
well,
Okay, guys. Wait till you see what he's pulling out now here.
it's a cholla bud.
Oh,
Now, when you live in the Sonoran Desert,
just smell.
when you live in the Sonoran Desert, you are cacti will be no stranger to you. It's everywhere. And
Wow.
I grew up in northern Arizona, and there's cactus in the forest, but at the same time, I didn't know
That's crunchy.
that cactus was edible. Yeah. Well, you what it is, it's dried, and you'll buy it dry, because this is cholla bud season right now in March and April, because you want to get them before the flowers blossom. And so because that's, and there was a
Now,
former
the only
flower-
place you can probably get this is by foraging, right?
by foraging, or you can look online and some people sell them.
Do they?
There's a nonprofit that sells them out of Sells, Arizona.
Oh, all right.
I like them because they're unique. They have a great flavor, and they're.
What do you use them for?
I put them in salads.
Oh, I like that.
They're pretty expensive. They're about $30 a pound.
Okay. But they look like they go far because
They
you can
go
crush them
really.
up.
Actually, they've been finding cholla buds in a lot of archaeological digs
Wow.
in Phoenix and Pueblo Grande. So they're still pretty good for their age. I use them for salads. You can pickle them after you cook them.
Now, are they relatively healthy?
Oh my goodness,
choice?
they are very healthy. They for every teaspoon. Let me see if I can remember this. For every tablespoon of cholla bud, it's equivalent. The calcium in that is equivalent to an 8-ounce size glass of vitamin D milk. So
Wow.
it's high in calcium, and it's a cactus product. So the thing that's really unique about cacti is most cactus ingredients have a very good way of balancing your blood sugar. So it helps your body balance its blood sugar. So if people just add cactus in their diet once a day, they'll have a really good way of controlling the sugar in their body. So
Now,
it's
the
very
Native
healthy.
American then foods or ingredients are very healthy, is
Yeah.
what you're saying,
Yeah,
telling me.
and what I say is, sadly it is. That's a joke. When people come up to the cafe and they say, well, can you please tell me what doesn't contain wheat flour, because I have a gluten intolerance. And so I go, well, let's look around. So I tell them, first and foremost, if you have a gluten intolerance, just stay away from the fry bread section. Just don't go there.
Right.
But when I take them to the other stations, I'll point out, well, that has flour, the cornbread has flour. Then we'll go to the next station. And each station has like about 8 to 10 dishes. And then we'll go to the next station, I'll say, oh, the cornbread is the only one that has flour at this station. And then we'll go to the other 2 stations, I'll say, oh, the dinner roll is the one that has flour, and then the flour tortilla is the one that has flour.
Now, could you use some of the other ingredients though as a flour ingredient
Yeah.
instead of flour
Well,
though
well, we
for
could.
those people?
But the point is, you have like about 50 dishes
Uh-huh.
in Misitam right now, and only the breads are the ones that contain flour, and mostly everything doesn't contain flour. Mostly everything doesn't contain dairy. So people tend to be really surprised that they're it's a healthy menu.
Mm-hmm.
And I say, I'm sorry that it turned out that way, but the food is really good. And you know,
That's a wonderful
yeah,
thing.
yeah,
Healthy and good.
Yeah.
Perfect combination.
And I think that's the beauty about. That's why I'm trying my best not to make native cuisine a trend. I wanted to just make it popular, because when it becomes a trend, people get excited all over it for about a year or two, and then it dies and goes away. But if we make it popular, it will always be here. And right now, one thing that I am not happy with is the food trends: gluten-free, sustainability, organic. Those are all things that are tied to native cuisine.
Mm-hmm.
And people will say, "Oh, well, this is benefiting this food trend here," and they throw the native food in there, and it's kind of like, but native food isn't trendy. You know, it's not. Don't add it to your trend. It's a global cuisine. It's a global cuisine, just like Asian cuisine, Italian cuisine, French cuisine. It's that big. So it's not a trend, and that's probably one thing that
Mm-hmm.
that's where my journey is becoming from defining native cuisine. It's kind of morphing into that.
Now, is there a special secret that you can share with us about, something about Native American foods that we'd like to know about? Either preparing them or an ingredient that really makes a big difference when you add it to a recipe?
Cactus.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Really.
Hey guys, you heard it here.
I stand by this, because the cholla bud, you can also grind it up in some people have two grinders in their house.
Right. Yes, that's
One
pretty
for
common.
spice and one for coffee.
Right.
Use the spice one and grind up the cholla bud. You can use it as a thickening agent.
Could you use it to make that bread, like we were talking
Yes.
about?
Yes.
So you could use it instead of the flour.
You
to
can make
the bread.
pastas with it as well when you grind it up.
Oh, that's a
Yeah.
nice thing. So that would work.
Yes. Wild rice is the same thing. You could grind wild rice up to make a wild rice meal.
That's pretty nutritious.
Yes. So
Wild rice.
you can. A lot of them are good substitutes for milled product.
Now, if somebody came to the cafe, okay, we're only spending one day here, what would you recommend them try from the cafe?
I would recommend them to try the 5-region sampler.
Oh, all right.
It's a platter that you get. You get you get 2 proteins, 1 salmon and 1 bison steak, and you get 3 sides.
Oh, that's
So
good.
you get
Mm-hmm.
you pretty much get a big plate of food,
Mm-hmm.
and it allows you to go to all the stations as well.
Now, do you have any future plans for the cafe that you can share with us?
I do, but I can't share them right now.
Sorry, folks. Okay.
But I will update you on it.
All
Yes,
right. Now,
yes.
that's a promise,
that's
isn't
a
it?
promise, yes.
All right. Now, I can't leave you without asking you this question.
Okay.
All right. What surprising or unique experience have you had while working at the cafe? Oh, I know. It's a loaded question, isn't
No,
it?
it's actually quite surprising. I thought I would miss friends, family, and people that I know, but everybody comes to DC. Whether if you're on a student trip, whether if people are here for a convention or just to sightsee, but at least twice a month, somebody I know comes to town. So that's probably the biggest. It has nothing to do with the cafe, but just working here and how many people I know that come and visit. And it's quite unique. I had family people come. I had cousins of cousins, and it just classmates. People just
Fill your life
yeah.
with happiness, huh?
They certainly do. But from the cafe standpoint, is truthfully and honestly, I wouldn't be here without my staff. And the biggest surprise is how great of a team I have. And they, my sous chefs make sure everything's taken care of.
Wonderful.
And again, I like to tell people that it's hard to believe that a chef is actually a manager. So we do the schedules. We make sure people are not getting overtime when it's not allowed. We make sure that the kitchen's clean. So we have a lot to do, and and people tend to just assume, oh, the chef's here, he'll come out and say hi, and but I have a kitchen to run. So
Sure.
that's one thing. But my staff is just great. They're the ones who make me look good. They're the ones who know what it is that I want, and they're the ones who know what it is I don't really like, as far as the food is concerned. So they respect me enough to make sure that they're following what I want them to do, and that's I think that's the best thing any chef can ask for.
That's a wonderful thing to have a team.
Yeah.
And this has been a great opportunity for all of us to learn so much from you.
Yeah.
And I really want to thank you for your time and everything that you've given us.
Well, thank you for your time and interest. I mean, I'm just a nobody. I'm just
Oh, we don't believe that.
I'm really just a nobody, and it surprises me how much interest people have in me, and it's so humbling, and it's such an honor. Thank
You are a fantastic resource to really let us know the inside story about the Native American culture. And I want to thank you, and I'm anxious to go out there and see it in action.
Well, it's all upstairs.